What's up, everybody? My name is Brad, and today I've got another short story review for you guys. I'm going to be talking about Mr. Harrigan's Phone, which is the first story in the new Stephen King collection, If It Bleeds. This is a collection of 4 short novelettes, if you will. And I'm going to be talking about the first one, like I said, Mr. Harrigan's Phone. As the thumbnail says, I am going to be talking about spoilers for this story. What my plan is, I'm going to do an individual video review for each story in the book, and that'll be a spoiler video. And then once I'm done with the book, I'll do one longer video, sort of my overall thoughts about the whole book, and that one will be non-spoiler. Real quick before I get into it, I have been doing a read-along with some other booktubers, Una in Crypto from the Codex Cantina, Leslie from the Nerdy Narrative, and Kasha from Kasha and Bookland. And we've been discussing it over on my Discord server, and it's been a whole lot of fun. And I'll put links to all their channels down in the description. We should be done with the third story, If It Bleeds, today when you're watching this video on Friday. And we'll be starting the last story in the book, Rat, on Saturday. So if you have this and are interested in doing a read-along with the last story, Rat, you can join in on the Discord server if you want. We're reading 20 pages a day until we finish the story. And like I said, we'll be starting that one on Saturday, so tomorrow by the time you're watching this video. But like I said, this is going to be spoilers just for the first story, Mr. Harrigan's Phone. For this one, I really enjoyed this story. It is different than Stephen King's earlier works, but more in line with his more recent stuff, where it's less on the horror aspects and more sort of literary, if you will. And if you really want a good literary deep dive, go check out the Codex Cantina's guys video. They did a great job. But you know, I feel like Stephen King has evolved as an author. Carrie came out in like 1974, so 46 years ago. And you know, those were more heavily horror based, his earlier works. And I don't feel like he's necessarily gotten away from that, but he has changed and evolved as an author over time to what he is writing now. And I really appreciate and enjoy that. So if you're looking for this to be a straight up horror novel, you might be disappointed going in if that's what you're thinking. Just know that it is not just straight up horror, but this first story does have a little bit of supernatural elements to it towards the end of the story. For this one, we're following, or our narrator for this one, his name is Craig, and he's an adult at this time, and he's sort of he's reflecting back, telling about a time when he was younger. And that's how the story progresses when he was younger, like high school, college, early adult. He's sort of time jumping through his life, telling his story about his times with Mr. Harrigan. This story does connect to Stephen King's larger universe. The town of Castle Rock is mentioned, which I'm sure everybody has heard of if they've read Stephen King. The story actually takes place in the town of Harlow, Maine, which is where the book Revival took place. And Craig and his father and then Mr. Harrigan, they attend the First Methodist Church of Harlow, which played a really important role in the Revival book. But Craig, his mother has passed away. I believe he's about 9 years old at the beginning of the story. And this is the time when the iPhone first came out, the very first one, to let you know the time that we're in. So it's just Craig and his dad, and he reads scripture at church, and that's where Mr. Harrigan comes up to his father and asks if it would be okay if Craig came over to his house and read to him a few hours a week, and then Mr. Harrigan would pay him for that reading. Mr. Harrigan, he's sort of new in town, but he's a retired business mogul. He's basically a millionaire, maybe even a billionaire. I don't know how rich he is, but he's super rich, and he's moved to Harlow for the great view, not the really good view, where tourists and stuff would come in, but a great view where it's just good enough for him to live out the rest of his days with. So him and Craig start this sort of friendship where Craig comes to his house and reads to him, and he reads books that Mr. Harrigan wants to read to him. And I didn't know this, but Edward Warren mentioned in his video that all the books that are being read by Craig to Mr. Harrigan are a lot of those authors were sort of racist authors, and all the books are sort of about greed and grabbing wealth and stuff, which says a lot about Mr. Harrigan is a character without actually saying anything in the story, which I felt was really cool, and I wouldn't have picked up on that unless I watched E's video. So thanks to E for mentioning that. That was a cool way to build a lot of character depth with this Mr. Harrigan without actually saying anything on the page, which was cool. But they form this relationship together, and Mr. Harrigan sort of becomes another father figure in Craig's life, giving him life lessons that his own father might not be able to give to him, based on Mr. Harrigan and his father's different pasts. But this is when the iPhone, like I said, first comes out, and Craig is able to buy one with some money he won from a scratch-off ticket that Mr. Harrigan gave to him for a present. And in return, he wants to do something nice for Mr. Harrigan. He wants to buy him his own iPhone, which he does. Before this, Mr. Harrigan doesn't have any technology in his house, no TV, no radio, or anything like that. And he does mention it at some point that he doesn't like those things in his house because he feels like it'll suck up all his time, and he has better things to do with his time than have these distractions in his life. But he does eventually accept the gift from Craig of the iPhone, and he does, sort of become addicted to it, reading newspaper articles and watching the stock market and things like that. And that is sort of where the story goes from there. Mr. Harrigan, getting attached to this technology, and Craig being attached to the technology. I think that was sort of the main theme that Stephen King was trying to get across in this story, is our sort of addiction and our reliance on technology, when really we should not be focused on that. We should be focused on the relationships that we can build with our friends and family and the people we interact with on a daily basis in real life, instead of always being focused on a phone or TV or whatever it may be. And I'm really guilty of that. I'm on my phone all the time. Sometimes it's hard for me to put it down. I'll just be scrolling mindlessly through Twitter or playing a game on my phone or whatever, when I should be doing other things. That's sort of the message she's trying to get across, that when we reflect back on our lives when we get older, and this sort of plays into a quote that I'll get into in a second that I really like. But looking back at our lives, our fond memories aren't going to be of our high score we had on our phone or this movie we watched on Netflix. Our fond memories are going to be of the people we met, the relationships we forged with each other, the adventures we went on with other people. Those are the really fond memories that we're going to hold on to and really remember, and pass on to other people. And this is the quote. It says it was an African proverb. I don't know if that part's true or not, but the quote was, "When an old man dies, a library burns." So when someone passes away, all the stories and things that they were able to tell, all that is gone forever. And that is something else. Mr. Harrigan's wanting Craig to read him these books, and that's a way for people to, have their stories outlive them. These stories can live forever. Writing them down on a page, whether you're an author, published author or not. Even myself, I've written a few things. They probably will never see the light of day, but they are down on paper somewhere where someone might stumble across them one day. And that is sort of, a legacy people can leave behind. When our physical bodies and minds die, our stories can still live on through, a book as a medium, which is really cool. But on with the phones. Mr. Harrigan, he eventually passes away, and being so attached to the iPhone, Craig slips it in his pocket at the funeral, so it gets buried with Mr. Harrigan. And then 2 times throughout Craig's life, once in high school, he's getting bullied, and he's very upset by that, and he decides to call Mr. Harrigan and talk to him about it. He leaves him a message on his iPhone after he's passed away. And then something mysterious happens to the bully, and he dies suddenly. And Craig gets a text message from Mr. Harrigan's username, which is, the supernatural aspects come into play. And then years later, one of Craig's favorite teachers from, I think it was college. I can't remember if it was college or high school. I think it was high school, because she was like a chemistry teacher. She passes away. She was hit by a drunk driver, and that really upsets Craig, because the guy who was drunk, he's sort of rich and is able to, get off with just a slap on the wrist because his family has money, and Craig doesn't think that is fair. So he knows he has this power, or at least he used to have this power. He's got a newer model iPhone now. He tries to call Mr. Harrigan's phone, and it doesn't work. It's just silent. So he digs up his old original iPhone, charges it up, and calls Mr. Harrigan's phone, and it rings and goes to his voicemail. So he sort of has this power in his hands, almost this godlike power. He knows in the past, he told Mr. Harrigan about an issue, and that issue was dealt with. We don't really get deep into the supernatural stuff with how it was dealt with, but he has this power in his hands, and he chooses to use it again. Leaves Mr. Harrigan another message, and then that drunk driver, he mysteriously dies as well. And Craig, he doesn't like this power, he doesn't like this use of technology, and he eventually severs ties with that original iPhone. He throws it into a lake. And that was sort of metaphorical, I believe, in not necessarily completely severing our ties with technology, because it is useful, it does have its purpose, but not being as dependent on it as we currently are as a society. Put your phone down, read a book, put your phone down, have a conversation with a friend, put your phone down, go for a walk, do something else besides being on your phone or watching TV and stuff all the time. The technology is not what we're going to remember. It's going to be those relationships and bonds we forge with people in real life. That's all I really have to say about this story. I did thoroughly enjoy it. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars, and I'm really looking forward to talking about the other stories in the book. This has been my review of Mr. Harrigan's Phone, the first story in the If It Bleeds collection by Stephen King. That's all I have for you guys today, so thanks for spending your time with me. Again, my name is Brad, and I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.